And,
Yeah.
you mentioned the Productivity Commission, other research has been done, not just in Australia, but elsewhere, to highlight that these incentive programs do not work. They simply push property prices higher. They make it more difficult for people to actually get into the market. And whilst there are a small proportion of people who can benefit at the taxpayer's expense, the overall debt level of the of the government continues to rise, which will then cause, well, guess what? We then need to see Chalmers saying, well, we've got to find other ways to try and actually square the circle. So why don't we raise some superannuation, and why don't we think about other things like property taxes or, spare room taxes and those sorts of things? Because the government is now backed into a corner where it's having to fund more and more of this housing sort of support mechanism from taxpayer funds. Taxpayers are already being taxed to high heaven, and now they're looking for other tax strategies based on assets. And I have a real problem
Yeah.
with that, because we're fundamentally, again, shifting the conversation about where we're going to find. And then the final point I want to highlight, Chalmers has now been talking about the intergenerational problem that's been created. And I believe that what we're seeing from our politicians now is an overt attempt to whitewash people by trying to blame the older Australians against the younger Australians. So it's not the government policy over the last 40 years that you mentioned earlier on. It's those greedy older people who've got these assets that they're the problem. We've got to actually tax them harder to try and actually restore balance.